All right, good morning, everybody. We are right back in the saddle here on Aired Out with New Hampshire native Gary Shattuck, who has served over 3 decades in the Vermont law enforcement community as a supervising officer with the Vermont State Police, Assistant Attorney General for the state of Vermont, prosecuting Vermont drug force uh, cases. My God, I mean, what a resume you have, Gary.
Well, I got lucky.
Man, oh man, 30 plus years. What was it like? And we're going to, of course, we're going to talk about your book, but what was it like prosecuting Vermont drug task force cases?
Well, it was great. I mean, the task force was made up of state and local officers, and so I was prosecuting cases that were made by guys that I worked with when I was with the state police. So we had a good camaraderie and did a lot of good work.
What a resume you have. I was so impressed reading through. And first of all, Raylene has already read your book. We're going to be getting into that this morning, but um, you were on the board of trustees for the Vermont Historical Society. I think you still are on the board for that.
Correct. Yes. Uh-huh.
Member of the University of Vermont's Center for Research on Vermont, past member of the Vermont Historical Records Advisory Board for the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration, and the Fort Ticonderoga National Council. And I'm just barely scratching the service here. Magna cum laude graduate of the Vermont Law School. You got a master's degree with honors in military history with a focus on the Revolutionary War. You've published a book on that. Um, this is quite impressive. Assistant United States Attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice, District of Vermont's Anti-Terrorism Coordinator, arguing cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Circuit. Wow, Gary, this is really
Oh,
something else.
shucks. Yeah. No, I, I guess my wife and I decided not to have kids, so we concentrated on careers, and I just kind of maybe went overboard. But
Wow.
I was just fortunate to be in a number of good places at the right time, and when challenges came along and there were openings, and I just raised my hand and was allowed to enter those doors. So it was a great privilege to do all of those.
You were a patrol commander with the Vermont State Police, graduating first in your class in academics and firearms. Um, what happened toward at one point in your career? You said, "I need to start writing down stuff. I'm an author. I need to start writing." And you've published what, 6 books now, right?
Yeah, Night Rider that we're going to talk about, right? That was the sixth one. It was.
Yeah.
I left DOJ 2006 and was able to turn my attention to my main love, which is history, and started to do some researching and writing and concentrated on court-related cases, legal aspects of interesting cases that had not been looked at, and found a lot of good information legal-wise that answered a lot of questions that were outstanding in a number of historical stories, and which led to the books.
Yeah.
And
So
the rest is history.
Night Rider Legacy, weaponizing race in the Irisburg affair of 1968, when a white man fired a shotgun blast into a home that was occupied by a black family. And this sparked a huge investigation that had rippling effects all over New England, especially obviously right here in Vermont. That's your book, your new book, which Raylene is saying is absolutely fantastic, and I don't doubt it. Can you tell us about this investigation?
Well, it was unlike anything that happened to the state before. The state police was only 20 years old at that time. It was founded in 1947, and this was the first really significant case um, of this nature involving race that the state has ever faced, and particularly that the state police had ever faced at that time. And so it was a turning point, and it was a very traumatic event, not only within Vermont society, but within the state police itself. And it found itself, quite surprisingly, receiving a lot of adverse publicity, uh, calling the police racist, which had significant effects in how it conducted itself in the next decades. And I described the course of what happened through 1979 within the state police because of this traumatic event that happened in Irisburg. That eventually, as I explained in the book, it went on to another one of the affairs the state police was involved in called the Rotterbit affair in St. Johnsbury, where a state trooper, a despondent state trooper, went to the Capitol building in July of '79 and took his revolver and shot himself, killed himself in the chest right at the state capitol in Montpelier.
What happened as how tragic? What happened as a result of that? I mean, reforms started soon after,
Right.
within like a year, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the state police found itself as the under a microscope on a number of studies that were done throughout the 1970s, and I relate all of those in the book, not in a lot of detail because it gets a little tedious. But there was a lot of attempts by the legislature to essentially find out what is wrong with the state police and how they could help it. And the state police became very insular, very defensive, and retracted into Redstone, which is the name of the state police headquarters there in Montpelier, rather, just a short distance away from the Capitol building.
It essentially, they just kind of refused to cooperate and work with the legislature, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was very surprising in one of the confirmation hearings of the Commissioner Francis Lynch in the mid-1970s. The senators inquiring of him asked, what is it was the problem with the state police? How come we haven't been able to deal with them for the last several years? They're not responding to us. They don't give us accurate budget information. How are we supposed to help you along? And so this kind of thing went on. It got worse under Lynch, the guidance of Lynch. So that when the Rotterbit affair happened, the trooper killed himself, and immediately in 1980, right after that happened, the legislature stepped in and said enough. And that's when we had the State Police Advisory Commission come into existence, and it's been.
And at that point, VSP heads were already withdrawing from public view and really just engaging. And this.
Well, yeah, throughout the '70s, yeah, yeah. I mean, Governor Snelling was just so fed up with it, he appointed a bureaucrat, Paul Philbrook, who had no police experience, no military experience, which is what the prior commissioners were. This was a bureaucrat that came in and did an excellent job to stabilize things. And then with the State Police Advisory Commission and the legislature watching very closely, we started to see reforms happening. But they only happened after a trooper killed himself.
Jeez. So these internal problems were kind of hanging out in the VSP for about a decade at least.
Oh, sure. I mean, the legislature traditionally has been very hands-off in a number of ways, and lets bygones be bygones and let things try and take their natural course, assuming that things were going to work out. And Snelling certainly thought that when he appointed Francis Lynch, that he'd be able to turn things around, but he didn't. And it just became so cataclysmic with the death of the trooper that they just, the government, the executive branch, the legislative branch stepped in and said, no more. We're not going to trust you to do things on your own. You're going to have oversight imposed on you, whether you want it or not.
What can you tell us from the book, Knight Rider Legacy, Weaponizing Race in the Irisburg Affair in 1968? More about this Rotterbit affair and who this despondent trooper was, and was this a direct result of stress as a result of this Irisburg affair? Was that the the reasoning, the blame behind this officer taking his own life?
If it's you're separating, it was separated by an 11-year period, and a lot happened within that 11-year period. We had the traumatizing effects of Irisburg. The thing that's so traumatizing about that event in Irisburg up on the Canadian border was the allegations that came out that the state police were racist, that they concentrated their efforts to investigate this black man who came from California along with not only his family, but he brought along his white mistress. And immediately after these shots were fired into the front of this black man's house, the state police responded and investigated vigorously. But history has not been kind to them in the way they conducted the investigation, and said that they did it in a racist manner, that they did not look for the shooter. Instead, they turned their attention to this black man and his involvement with this white woman. And so I went into the state archives and went through all of the papers that are there. It was like a gold mine. It had never been opened before. And it was a wealth of information, and I describe it in the book. And the fact is, the state police did an incredible investigation, investigating more than 220 witnesses, involving some 20 troopers. Went on for roughly a couple of weeks, but they identified the shooter fairly quickly and brought him to justice. But in the middle of this is when this bizarre event happened, where the black man was discovered in the act with this white woman at his home while troopers were outside guarding it after this shooting. So the press was pretty, it turned it into a circus.
This black man was already deceased at that point?
No, he was living in this home with his family along with this white woman. They had come from California. They had just bought a home in Irisburg.
And was he killed in that shooting?
Oh no. The what happened was, as far as the shooting goes, this black family moved in to Vermont at a very sensitive time into a community that was into a county that was just recently called a hunger county by national authorities because of its extreme poverty and malnutrition.
Wow. Yeah.
And then Governor Hoff was pushing a youth project to bring black inner city kids to Vermont. So you have to put this in context that the Vermonters were very upset with both the poverty and the malnutrition, but also the blacks coming in. So that when this black man moved here from California, it just set off the emotions of people. And in this particular event, a white man and another one of his friends, along with a female, drove up into Irisburg late one night looking for this home. And this guy, who was on leave from the service, brought along a shotgun, and they found the home, and they fired into the front of it. Nobody was hurt. But then they drove up the road, and they circled around and came back, and they fired into it again, and then drove off. So nobody was hurt in the house. But the clergy and the press immediately jumped on the fact that it was a black man's home shot into in the middle of the night as a racist thing, and then the state police became involved and became guilty by association. So I was trying to, in looking at these records from the archives, to set the record straight, to show that there's no evidence of racism on the part of the police, but certainly there was on behalf of the man that was firing the shotgun.
You must receive the information, the news of what, everything that has transpired here over the last couple of years, George Floyd in particular. You must process the news differently, I think, maybe than most folks, having done so much research on this of this incident going back to the late '60s. That just police relations in general, with regard to people of color, can be just very sensitive still.
Yes. And I think Vermont has been removed from a lot of that, clearly because of its geographic location and the number of whites versus the number of minorities in the state. And you mentioned a good word there. I process it differently, and I think that's probably very true, because I don't come personally from a background where racism was an issue. And certainly in my time living or working with the state police, I was there between 75 and 1987, and working closely with troopers and knowing the command people and all. This whole issue of race was like a non-issue. We really didn't have reason to be racist because there was really nothing to be racist against. Not that people didn't have their own internal prejudices, but it just was not a subject of conversation. We had no incidents that I can think of in the 1970s involving police minority situations that resulted in the kinds of things that you're seeing today. We were dealing with drugs. We were dealing with the hippie situation, if you will. There was a number of other things that were going on in the 70s than race. That was not a driving factor in Vermont at that time.
In other parts of the country, certainly, late '60s, but Vermont, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, clearly, the metropolitan areas of Detroit, Newark, Los Angeles, you saw riots in 1967, 68. And yeah, it was a very big problem, and it was a driving factor that caused Governor Phil Hoff to create this youth project, along with Mayor John Lindsay from New York City, to bring, I believe, it was roughly 600 blacks and Hispanics from the city to Vermont to live in. They went to the different colleges and lived in the dormitories and participated in a number of projects. It was a chance to let these minority young adults, teenagers, to see a different slice of life than the city.
Yeah, the fresh air kids, I think, is what many of us know it as, right?
Well, that was one of the things that angered a lot of people, is we had this fresh air program already going on since 1876, I believe it was. Vermont was involved right at the very beginning. So for roughly a century, we've been sponsoring inner city black kids coming up, and that was a very successful program. And it was in 1968 at the time of Irisburg. But then Hoff went off and created this program with Lindsay to bring them up. And it's quite surprising, because in my research I found the evidence that we had this malnutrition and poverty in the Northeast Kingdom, in particular Orleans County, where Irisburg is. And that Hoff's own administration, people within the administration, were saying, this is a screaming problem. We must do something about it now. We must marshal all state money and personnel that we can to deal with it. But Hoff ignored it. He did nothing about it and pursued the youth project. So that kind of shed a whole lot of new light on what the atmosphere was in Vermont dealing with race and poverty and malnutrition all happening at one time.
We're chatting with Gary Shattuck, who's the author of his latest book, book number 6, I believe, Night Rider Legacy, Weaponizing Race in the Irisburg Affair of 1968. I'm guessing that you have you've got a lot of time, many hours, countless hours invested in doing your research to write this book. How long have you been at it?
Oh, it's probably took 3 years or so. I'd been doing these other books, but on the side, picking up bits and pieces of these affairs. And then all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb going off. My God, we've got 3 affairs that happened in Vermont, and
Right.
they all involved the state police. We had the Irisburg in '68. We had Paul Lawrence. The people, some of your listeners may recognize that name, others may not, but that was a notorious case in '73 to '75 involving a former state trooper setting up people with bogus drug cases and receiving a number of unwarranted convictions. Roughly 72 people that Governor Salmon had to pardon because of him. And then thirdly, we had the Rotterbit affair in 1979. So within this 3-year or 11-year period, we had the state police as central players in these 3 pivotal law enforcement related issues that ranged from race to suicide.
And the Paul Lawrence affair, is that the subject of the Green Mountain Opium Eaters, the history of early addiction in Vermont? Anything? Is that what it's about? Is that a totally different
you're
thing?
referring to that. That was Paul Lawrence was in the 1970s. The book you're referring to, Green Mountain Opium Eaters, was the research I did involving Vermont's first drug epidemic, which grew and grew and grew throughout the 1800s, so that by 1900.
Oh, when you say early, you're talking early.
Oh, yeah. We had a significant heroin, morphine, opium addiction problem in 1900.
What?
But that's true. Yeah, we were consuming 3.3 million doses of opium a month in Vermont. We were in the stratosphere as far as drug use goes. You'll have to take a look at the book. I outline all of that.
I will. How does are you abreast of how that compares to today?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that they are comparable, but I mean, today we have so many more different kinds of drugs so readily available. But the drug problem in the 1800s was like a frog sitting in the water on a stove, and you slowly turn it up, and you don't realize you got a problem until it begins to boil. And it took a number of years for the consumption of opium happening here in Vermont to finally. And Vermont's crazy as far as regulation goes. The legislature had a hands-off attitude. I mentioned about what happened in the 1970s, but back then with the licensing of doctors, it did not have anything. It refused to have anything to do with licensing of doctors. So that it was the Wild West in the medical field, and it blossomed. By the year 1900, a UVM professor did a big study on the consumption of drugs, and that's where I came up with those figures I just mentioned: 3.3 million doses a month. Crazy numbers.
3.3 million a month?
And you break it down to the amount of population, people who lived here in the state. It was I don't remember the exact numbers now, but the number of doses per person per day was crazy.
Oh my gosh. How do you do your research, Gary? Where's your go-to? Do you get into the Vermont History Center? Where do you go? What do you do? Are you mostly at home on your computer? How do you find out this?
Oh no, no. It's a lot of traveling, and I spent a lot of time in the archives in Middlesex, and become friends with Tanya Marshall, the archivist there, and some of the other archivists, and they've been very helpful. And I cast a wide net, and I review a lot of documents there, and then I get leads to take me over to the Vermont Historical Society in Barrie, or up to Silver Collections at UVM, or the Henry Sheldon Museum in Middlebury. So we go to a number of places, and once in a while down to the National Archives down in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Have you always been somewhat of a history buff, Gary, or was this something that was just blossoming later in life while you were a Vermont State Trooper?
No, I've been reading history since I was a teenager. So, and then, but when I decided to walk away from doing active law, I decided to look at things more particularly, rather than just accept the stories in the books, go and look for the facts that the stories were based on. And that's where I was been fortunate to find just a ton of stuff that showed that a lot of accounts of history are incorrect, and to put a lot of meat on the bones. And that's what I've been trying to do with these different books.
And you have consulted with countless folks that have helped you with your groundbreaking research.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of archivists, historians, both in Vermont and New York. I just can't count them all. I mean, yes, no. I just ask a lot of questions, and I found that when you have a certain premise and you ask why you have that premise, that and you look for the actual primary sources, that's when the gold breaks open. And so you get leads from people, and both from people and from the documents from the archives.
Well, when I was studying up on you a little bit, I saw the P Word podcast. What's this Dispatches podcast all about?
The what? I'm sorry?
The Dispatches? Was he
Dispatches.
yeah. Apparently a podcast. Maybe I found this when I was reading about the Journal of the American Revolution book.
Oh, the Journal. Yeah, the Journal. Yes, they have their own. The Journal of the American Revolution. I've contributed some articles to them. They have their own podcasts, a lot like what you and I are doing right now, where they interview authors and historians. So.
Yeah, called Dispatches. I'll have to check that out. But I mean, your stuff's been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, History Channel, Discovery Channel, Smithsonian, NPR, Mental Floss. The list goes on. This is really impressive, Gary.
Well, you know more about the recitation of my work than I do. I know that it's been cited in some places, but I was not aware it was Smithsonian or Time that cited it.
Yeah, man. You're just tell me where we can find Knight Rider Legacy, Weaponizing Race in the Irisburg Affair, 1968.
It's available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also through the Center for Research on Vermont, through the University of Vermont.
And it just came out.
And I believe it's in some bookstores, I believe, in the Burlington area.
And it just recently came out.
It did. It kind of slowly came out. We've had kind of a soft opening where it's just appearing. But working with Richard Watts, who's the director at the center, and they've got some things planned, and we'll be making more of a splash here in the next month or so.
What was one of the highlights that stands out in your life? Was it working with the DOJ? Was it your time in Iraq as a legal advisor in Kosovo?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of things here in Vermont with DOJ, but I was fortunate to receive to get picked to go to Iraq in 2003, right on the heels of the 3rd Infantry. They stabilized the community, and I was a part of a team that went into the country, and we did analysis of the legal framework and the problems with the courts that might have gotten bombed out, and trying to get the judges and prosecutors back in line and getting them up and working. So that was that was quite a stressful educational time period to be in a war zone with soldiers all the time, working with the civilian Iraqis. In Kosovo, it wasn't quite that dicey. Things we were working with UNMIC, the United Nations mission in Kosovo, and I was assigned to the OSCE, which is the Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe, and was putting together training for judges and prosecutors in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, and that was very rewarding work. Iraq and Kosovo were, I think, defining moments in my life. It was a great honor to be chosen, and then also to go and work with the nationals in those countries in such important things as their rule of law situation, getting their courts up and working.
And the USAG has recognized you with several awards for your work. This is just remarkable, Gary.
Well, thank you. But like I said earlier, I mean, I've just been fortunate. I've been in the right place at the right time, and was allowed to walk through those doors.
I'm guessing that somewhere in Irisburg, we can pick up a copy of your latest book.
Well, maybe in Irisburg. I don't know if there are bookstores there, but perhaps in St. Johnsbury.
Yeah, I would think that that they would have it up there. If they don't, they ought to get a copy of it. And we encourage our history nerds tuning in, listening across the state of Vermont and across New England to grab a copy of Knight Rider Legacy: Weaponizing Race in the Irisburg Affair, 1968, with author Gary Shattuck, who's residing here in the Green Mountain State and still writing, still researching. Do you have something else in the pipe here, or are you going to catch your breath here for a little while?
I'm catching my breath right now. I've got some interesting things happening in Europe right at the moment, so too early to say, but got some interesting things happening that I'm pursuing.
Well, listen, if you ever get up near Central Vermont area for any kind of book signing or anything, make sure to let us know about it. We'd love to be there for this. And
I will.
We support you immensely here at the Aired Out Podcast. Raylene just raves about what she's read in your book. Absolutely fascinating. Jason Gould, same story. We hope to meet you someday, and if you can schlep up here this summer, come on up and grab a camera with us and come back on the show.
Thanks, JD. I appreciate it.
All right, Gary Shattuck joining us on the phone today, this time around on Aired Out. The author of Knight Rider Legacy: Weaponizing Race in the Irisburg Affair, 1968. We've had couple of pictures of what the book looks like. Grab a copy today. Maybe give it as a gift to someone that you know who loves reading about Vermont history. So that's going to do it. We've got many more podcasts in the pipe here that we're going to be teasing you about and sharing with you over the next couple of days. We got a lot of stuff going on. Friday morning, in particular, is going to be a busy one. Freezing Fun for Families is going to be kicking things off that morning at 9 o'clock. But do keep careful watch of the page, and we appreciate your eyes and your ears, and of course, we appreciate our sponsors for bringing you the podcast. I love chatting with, as you know, with local artists and folks who tick in our Green Mountain State, just like Gary Shattuck. Awesome. Cornerstone Restaurant, one of our sponsors, as you can see on the list here. What's that now?
It's Burger Night.
Burger Night? Oh, is it tonight?
At Cornerstone, it's Tuesday.
Oh, that's right. It is Tuesday. Raylene just reminding me that tonight is $5 Burger Night over at the Cornerstone. So get on over there. Emsley's Florists and Gifts, Giroux General Transport, Fontaine Forestry and Millwork, Green Mountain Mulch, Fecto Homes, Salvador and Babbitt. Fun to have Tom Lozon from Salvador and Babbitt earlier today. Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce, Barrie Area Development, FGB Theaters. We're going to be posting up the movie listings for the coming weekend. I know it's only Tuesday, but we'd like to give you a nice big heads up, so we'll have that posted up in a little bit. Gusto's. What's happening at Gusto's? Is it Taco Tuesday? Yes. It is Taco Tuesday over at Gusto's. Got to get over there. CW Creative, Vermont Custom Woodworking, ASB Financial, right here at 185 North Main Street in Barrie, where our studios are. The Barrie Montpelier Times-Argus, Donnybrook Fight Promotion, February 19th, Battle in Barrie 6. We've got tickets. Do you have tickets? Get on DonnyBrookFightPromotions.com to grab yours, or check them out on Facebook. Wood Doodles, Wright Electric, Gauthier's Quality Grounds and Maintenance, Preston's Kia. I think we got Jason Trombley, right?
He's coming in.
Jason Trombley's coming in, I think, is it Friday morning?
Yeah, maybe a guest even.
With maybe a guest. Yes, that's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Granite City MMA and Barslow Construction, rounding out our list of, I think we're right around 20 presenting sponsors here at the Aired Out Podcast. Listen, if you enjoyed the show today, make sure that, first off, you tell your friends about Aired Out, and follow the page. If you're not already, just follow it. That's simple. And you'll get a notification when we go live next. And, of course, always click like, drop a comment, and do share away. Thanks again to Gary Shattuck, our guest this time around on Aired Out.